Well, good afternoon. I think that means that we are live with you. Thank you so much for joining us here on this very special and pertinent webinar. You're joining myself, Marcel Gordon. You'll know me on various platforms. At the moment, you will see me every weekend on ENCA, where I present the morning show on that ungodly hour of 6 o'clock until 9 o'clock. But most importantly, today, we're here in association with the Mail and Guardian and Impaq, talking about the importance and finding out more about homeschooling, specifically in the times and the days and the very long months that we are living through right now. Homeschooling is nothing new, of course. It's something that was recognized in South Africa's SA Schools Act back in 1996 already, but it's something that really has become a top and hot topic for so many people who are considering important things like their children's education, when their safety and their health is exceptionally key, and whether or not traditional schooling systems is what is where their children belong and should stay right now. It's a very personal decision. It's one that shouldn't be judged. But what we're here to do today is to perhaps help you make an informed decision about what to do about your children's education, and whether the various forms of homeschooling is indeed for you and is indeed a fit for you and your children and your family. But that's not going to be up to me to give you that information. What do I know about these important things? With me, I have on this panel in this special webinar, I have Louise Squinwinkel, who is the Managing Director for Optimi Home, which is part of the family with Impaq, who is bringing you this webinar along with the Mail and Guardian. And my other panelist is Nadira Musa, who is an entrepreneur. And important for this discussion is that she has been homeschooling her own children, who are teenagers now. Commiserations, I'm sure a lot of you will be at the mention of that. She's been homeschooling her own children for the last few years. So enough from me right now. Let's bring our panelists in here. Louise, let's start with you. You're the MD for Optimi Home. Optimi Home is the organization, the business that owns Impaq, who's bringing this webinar and all of this very important information to the comfort of various people's homes, laptops and PCs. You have been in the business of homeschooling and education for a long time already, and you bring with you lots of learnings and experience over those last few years, and something that I'm sure you've been inundated with queries of people finally having to come to terms with whether or not homeschooling is indeed for them. Tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Marcel. It's great to be with you this afternoon, and I certainly hope for our listeners out there, I don't know what you call someone who's dialing into a webinar. Participants. I certainly hope that we could shed some light on all the questions that you might have today. So just a little bit about myself. I don't have an educational background. I'm actually a chartered accountant who realized very early on in my corporate career that I'm very passionate about education. So after a few turns, I ended up with the Optimi Group. I've been with the group for about 3 years now, and we focus on accessible learning solutions for all in South Africa. So we have various different products in our group, ranging from schooling products to corporate products. But we're here to talk today, we're here to talk about Impaq, which is our homeschooling solution. And I really hope that we can give our participants the necessary information that they would need.
I'm sure you're going to be a wealth of experience and indeed information as well. I just want to double check if we've got Nadira with us so that we can bring her into the conversation. But while we wait for that to happen, let's bring in some of our participants. We put it out there to say we've got hundreds of people who have registered, over 1,000 really, who have registered. So let's not put too much fear into our panelists' hearts right now, but it shows how very interested people are in finding out more and getting the right information that they need to make these important decisions for themselves and their families. So we've put it out there that we've asked our participants just to mention who they are, where they're from, so we can get an idea of how widely the webinar is being watched and is being listened to, and to show that it's not just in our major cities where people are contemplating whether homeschooling is for them. It's in every nook and cranny of this great country of ours. and something that, and just shows that it's something that people are talking about right now as we navigate this life and this new normal that people are speaking about so often. We've got Nicolene from Secunda, we've got Chris from Johannesburg, who's got an 11-year-old son. Bethel is from Mpumalanga. Luwanda is from Angola. Robin from Cape Town. We've got Gloria, who's got a son in grade 3. And even people from here in Johannesburg, Malanshof, from Florida, from Limpopo, a little bit further away from where we are right now. Karen has tuned in. She's got a grade 6 kid in Alberton. And we've got Jeruska, who's got a teenage son in grade 10. He's in public school in Leidenburg. Molachadi, welcome. Molachadi is from Pretoria. The son is in grade 3 and is registered with Impaq. So there's some real lived experience as well. Chanel is from Mondior. We've got Zor from Orange Farm. And the list just goes on and on. And that just warms my heart, because it shows that what we're doing here today is bringing people important information that they can use right now in these very difficult times. And it also shows that in as much as we all have to keep away from each other for safety, there are so many things that are connecting us right now. And that one thing that's connecting us is making decisions that are best for our children's future. So Nadira has joined us. Nadira, as I mentioned earlier, you're an entrepreneur. You and your husband took the decision, I think in 2017, to homeschool your children. Tell us firstly about yourself and then your decision to homeschool.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity, and welcome to the listeners as well. So basically, my background is an HR professional. I've been in the corporate world for about more than 25 years. I've joined most recently as an entrepreneur, a home tutor as well. So I've transitioned from the corporate world into being an entrepreneur, a mentor, and a tutor, in partnership with Impaq as well. I've seen the value of homeschooling, and that is why I would like to also bring that to our community in the East Rand. What informed my decision, in 2017, to homeschool my kids. I have 2 kids, a girl and a boy. And when my daughter reached high school, second year of high school, she brought home some concerns. She raised some concerns in terms of, school bullying and violence and illegal substance abuse. And we actually, then investigated this, and we were also shocked and were not happy with what was going on in the school, and this illegal substance abuse and violence and peer pressure was increasing at an alarming rate, and this is the main reasons that that we decided to homeschool my daughter. And she was already in the second year of high school, so she was already at an age where she was independent and was able to self-study. So with my son, we recently, when he reached high school, that was last year, the year before last. So we then, thought of putting him into a private school to understand, maybe there's a different experience there before we homeschooled him, because knowing your kids is very important before you make a decision to homeschool or not to homeschool. And with him, we knew that, he was more on the laxy days. He needed much more structure. And that's why we decided to put him in the private school. But later on, the first year, we saw that there was a steady decline in his performance, his attitude. There was just something not right. And we also investigated that, and also we were shocked that in a private school, there is also this abuse, there's peer pressure, there's violence, and there's also, drugs. And that was shocking, and we decided now that, he would also then transition and journey. His homeschool started last year.
Okay, so now we have an idea of where that decision, later on, we will delve into that kind of decision making and what kind of response you had to that decision. But Louise, if I could bring you in here, we've heard now the decision, the various factors that went into Nadira and her husband deciding to homeschool their children. There are different reasons for different families, depending where they are, what their personal experience has been. Right now, that decision was taken years ago, very personal decision, That was even before we'd ever heard of something called coronavirus. We're working from home and schooling from home is something that people are very seriously considering for health reasons, of all things. It's a difficult decision to make, but one that should be made in an informed way, isn't it, Louise?
Absolutely, Marshall. And I think before a family decides to homeschool, it's important to recognize this is a family decision. It's not something that one parent can make or a child can beg for and the parents don't really buy into it. It's really something that the whole family should be committed to making, because essentially as a parent, you're taking responsibility for your child's schooling, which is a big responsibility to take on if you're not committed and ready for it. So I think, first of all, it's a family decision. And then just to recognize, and I think Nadira mentioned it as well, every child is unique. So know your child. Homeschooling does wonders for certain individuals, and for others, it just doesn't work. And we have clients where some of their children will be homeschooled and others will go to school. So it's very much a personal decision and a decision that needs to be made as a family unit. And then there are various different reasons why people decide to do it. We have clients who live in outlying areas, so they homeschool because there is just not a school close by, so they prefer to spend that time as a family rather than sitting in traffic. We have clients who travel a lot, so they prefer to take their families with them, or they're working overseas. I know we have a participant from Angola, so we have quite a few expats who still want to teach their children the South African curriculum because they're planning to come back. So they homeschool for a few years while they're working in Taiwan or in the Middle East or in Africa somewhere. So you have those options. And then you have lots of people who do it because their kids really fare better when they are being homeschooled. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to do the math. If you give someone more individual attention, they are probably going to fare better in the long run. Than sitting in a big classroom where you can't, even the most brilliant teacher in the world can't structure a lesson to include proficiency levels from for 20 to 30 to 40 kids. So there are various different reasons why people do it. And I think at the forefront at the moment, we've certainly seen it. For the past 4 months, we have a lot of clients who are signing up for health reasons. Because they have family members with comorbidity, so they really just can't attend school at the moment, and they're left without other options. Not all schools have brilliant online programs that they can carry on with. So we've definitely seen a massive uptake in people who are doing it for health reasons as well.
Now, Louise, we talk about the various reasons people can consider when deciding whether or not homeschooling is for them. But there are also lots of different options for what your homeschooling will look like. You've got online school, you've got e-learning, you've got virtual school, you've got this blended experience, you've got remote teaching. From your experience, what is the biggest difference between those different models for homeschooling?
Okay, so Marshall, there's even bigger models of homeschooling. So you get the eclectic approach, and then you get a curriculum-based approach, and I'll very briefly explain those. So Impaq is a curriculum-based approach. We follow the CAPS curriculum, which is the same curriculum that schools in South Africa follow. Then you get the eclectic approach, which is very much more a fluid approach where a parent will put together basically their own curriculum from using different resources. And then you get unschooling, which is the complete, it's actually not a curriculum. That's where parents will teach their children certain life skills as they see fit and maybe pull in a few subjects here and there. So we're a curriculum-based option, and then within the curriculum-based space, you'll get different options. So you'll get your traditional only hard copy books options. Then you'll get options where learners will learn via online content, which is more, that's what e-learning is, when there's a static video and static questions on a portal and you go through the course step by step. And then you'll get virtual learning or online schooling. That's something that's really become a household name, I think, the past couple of months. That's what we're doing now. That's when the teaching happens live online, and there's a live teacher who's going through the subject content with these learners. And then your blended learning approach would be to combine all of these methods. So what we do at Impaq, for example, is we follow a blended learning model. So we have hard copy material or ebooks, which covers the full curriculum, and you could only use that if you would prefer to do that. But then we also have a guided learning platform, which has videos and quiz content and things on there, which is a static e-learning type process where learners can go through the content. And then we've also introduced, and this is something new we did, we always wanted to do it, and then lockdown happened, and then all of a sudden we just started doing it for all our grades. From grade R to 12, we have live online lessons. So for a certain time of the day, you'll have your live lesson where you'll tune in and there'll be a teacher who goes through the lesson material with you. So I hope that covers more or less what the different modes are. In my experience, I think a blended approach works best, and it also differs in terms of the grades that learners are at. So a grade 1 learner doesn't fare well when they're doing online live lessons the whole day, because they still need to learn how to write in their books. There's a lot of cognitive development that takes place where they physically need to interact with the material, where a grade 12 learner will probably fare better by doing more online work. So it's also about knowing your child. And then we have learners with issues who fare better online or fare better with hard copies. So we try and do a more blended approach to fit all those different needs.
And Nadira, if I could bring you in there, Louise has now very concisely gone through the different options that there are. They find that with most kids, people opt for a blended approach. How did you go about deciding what approach to homeschooling would work for your kids?
Okay, so I decided to go with the curriculum-based because I think, the kids are able to read and study, self-study, do a lot of self-study. Also because I was able to understand and go through the whole curriculum for the year and understand and do the lesson planning for them. So the curriculum actually gives you, there's a facilitator guide and there's a learner guide. So the facilitator guide would help you as a parent or the facilitator or the tutor to understand what are the lessons for the rest of the year. What does the child need to cover for the rest of the year? And then you can now, plan your lessons accordingly, or, put in, some life options in there, put activities in there. So you can actually just make the curriculum the way you want, But also the other thing that was important for us is that, still staying within the CAPS syllabus, still having that. So if the child, or if we decided that maybe we wanted to send them back to a traditional school, the transition would be very easy for the kids. And also, after they completed their matric, we needed to understand that definitely they would get the senior certificate that would allow them entry into a university or a tertiary institute. So that was that's the reason, that's our reasons for deciding on the curriculum-based learning.
And at the time, did you feel, you came from a corporate background, you specialize in HR. Did you feel quite overwhelmed by making this decision and finding out what you needed to know and what the legalities were involved?
Yeah, most definitely. I think it took a lot of time. I think when my child reached the second year of high school, it's almost that the first term was where she was feeling very uncomfortable. So we didn't give much time because we didn't want to lose the whole term, because now what do we do? So it's almost just dawned upon us. So it wasn't something that we were speaking about the year before, that okay, next year we are now going to enter you in. So she was quite happy to move into the next year of high school. But now when she arrived there, things were, the environment was just different. I don't know what happened or what, but she was just not happy. So we had very little time to make a decision as to what do we do now. She wasn't interested in going to a private school or into another government school. And then one of the teachers actually spoke to me and said, you know what, I know of Impaq, maybe you want to do some research on homeschooling. And that's where it started. And that's where I learned about Impaq, and I did more investigation. I called them, I went there. I also did a lot of, research on other homeschooling, options that were out there. And also there's a lot of research. There's a lot of things on the internet that you can find, but nothing. I needed to know that there needed to be a curriculum that fits with my child, not the other way around, not that she has to fit with something. So Impaq, that's what gave me the comfort, knowing that actually she will cope with this curriculum on her own if she needed to self-study. The advantage for us was that she was already at the age where she could read and write and do all of that. So it was very much independent. So there was very little guidance and help from us. But obviously it's new. It is very new when we started up. And as, working, and also at the start, I think the first 6 months was challenging for us. Coming from a corporate world, very structured, very rigid, I wanted her to learn in that way. I didn't want her to lose that school environment at the home. But what I was doing was that it was more detrimental and putting more pressure on us than making it easy for us. And when I spoke to some of my very experienced homeschooling friends, they laughed at me and they said that we've all been there. And what you need to do is to de-school, just to detox, to unwind and have some downtime. And that's, so in the first few weeks, we just did nothing. We just didn't do school. We had the books, we just didn't start. Okay, so we just started to, talk about and read together, and we would have field trips together. So we would go out together and just get to understand what are they interested in, what do they like, and then the learning started slowly, naturally.
Now, that's a very important topic for us to discuss, but I'm going to ask you both to pause there. Let's bring our participants in here in a real well. They're still letting us know where they are messaging from. We've got Limpopo, we've got the East Rand, we've got Precious, who's got a grade 3, who's just registered. We've got the Mid Rand people who are listening in. And as far as from Centurion, Sandton, Pretoria, and the list just goes on and on. Hammanskraal as well. Well, let's bring them into the conversation here, because we actually have a poll for our participants to be a part of. Let's get that poll for you. What is your current sentiment amid the pandemic? What is your current sentiment amid the pandemic? Brick and mortar school is still my preference, is your first option. Your second option is schools should conduct both face-to-face and online schooling. So a question of whether you want the schools to do a blended approach to schooling. I am considering taking my children out of school, and homeschool will be the option, is your other option. And then the last option, do you feel that your children or can you let us know if your children are already homeschooling? So please take part in that poll. It will give us a good sense of where all of you are at right now. We've got quite a few people taking part in today's webinar who are already doing it, but I dare say as many are wanting to find out whether or not homeschooling is something that they really should consider. Our poll today is, what is your current sentiment amid the pandemic? And the polling question is already being answered. It's streaming in. We can already see the activity there. My children already homeschooling around 50%. And then also I am considering taking my children out of school, and homeschool will be the option. So please do take part in our poll. You'll see it pop up there, and you can just click on what is your best answer for that question. Louise, if I can bring you in there. We heard from Nadira now talking about how they decided what would be the best approach to homeschooling. She mentioned there that Impaq was a great help. But there are certain legalities involved that one does have to get out of the way before you start this great big world of homeschooling. And you can do field trips with your family. You don't have to fill out all those pesky forms that schools make you fill out. And that kind of thing. What are some of the legalities that parents do need to be, or even guardians need to be aware of before they delve into this world?
Marsha, I'm so glad you asked that question, because I think that's one of the most important questions, and it's actually something that people contact us a lot about. There's a lot of misinformation out there in the market. So number one, homeschooling is legal. You've already mentioned it. Our Schools Act does provide for it. School is compulsory until the age of 15 or grade 9, whichever is achieved sooner. So up until the age of 15, our Schools Act states that parents have to register with the Department of Education if they are homeschooling. I know that a lot of parents in South Africa choose not to do that. Our Act acts, but it is a legal requirement. So that's up to every family to decide, and people have their reasons why they decide not to do it. Then from the age of 15, so grade 10, 11, and 12, you have to do through a registered curriculum provider who's registered with an examination board. So in South Africa, we have 3 examination bodies that offer our NEC certificate, which is our matric certificate. That is Sakai, the IEB, which is the independent examination body, and the DBE, which is our Department of Basic Education. So if you attend a public school, you will be writing the DBE's exam. If you attend a private school, most of the private schools writes the IEB exam, and then Sakai is the distance learning exam body. So they have mostly distance learning providers like Impaq, so homeschooling curriculum providers. In grade 10 to 12, we refer to distance learning. And then they also have a few smaller private schools who they also supply the exam to. Sakai, the IB, and the DBE are all registered with Umalusi, who is the overseeing governing body of our matric exam. So you can't write matric if you didn't do grade 10, 11, and 12 through a body that's registered with one of these exam boards. So I think those are some of the important notes that parents need to know. But up until grade 9, there you can do your own curriculum. I'm sorry, I see my cat has joined the conversation.
Also in finding out about homeschooling, so don't worry,
Yes.
because this has an impact on the cat's life as well.
Absolutely, and luckily it's not one of my toddlers, because that would have been a much more participative participant. So hopefully she'll just sit there. So I think in a nutshell, those are the important things. To summarize, up until grade 9, you're required to register by law. After that, you need to ensure that you're with a provider that's actually registered to offer the NEC exam.
Well, speaking about registration, allow me to try and bring in one of the questions there. It's just disappeared off my screen for a second, so just give me a little while. There was a question from Monique Kluter, who's a participant in our webinar. She says, I registered my daughter for grade R and started late June. Do I still need to register at the Department of Education? Because that's the reality we're dealing with now. This coronavirus arrived after people had already decided, okay, this kid is going to this school for this year, and then life happened, and they perhaps decide, actually, we need to make another plan, and we're now already in the middle of the year. What can Monique do?
Marshall, grade R is not a compulsory phase to register with the department. So it's from the age of 7. So I think in Monique's case, I would just ensure, if I'm her, I would just ensure that you do follow a robust enough curriculum so that you can get into grade 1 at the school of your choice. Or if you want to carry on homeschooling, that actually makes it a bit easier for you, because you can then carry on with grade 1 as you are the responsible person who's deciding to progress to the next grade.
So that's a question we've answered from Monique. There are going to be quite a few questions streaming through. We'll see what we can answer. We've got somebody from the Mail and Guardian, I think from Impaq as well, who's trying to answer some of those questions as well. But obviously, we'll try and cherry pick some of those questions for both Louise and Nadira to answer as we go along. You'll also see messages coming up there from the Mail and Guardian with little bits of information that you can use if you want to find out more. For instance, to homeschool for the rest of 2020 and get a discount, you can just go onto that Impaq website. That's the link has been placed there on the chat group, and you can just click on that if you want to find out more. Let's talk about roles. Yes, Louise?
Sorry, just to mention as well, I forgot to mention that if people want to find more out about registering with the DBE, we have links on our website. It's an online process, and there are links. You register with your provincial department. So it's different per province. So they could go on there and also read up a bit more and then click on the links to go through to the government website.
Fantastic. And also, if you want to find out more from Louise, if you have further queries for Louise or Impaq, you can also send a direct email to info@impaq. That's IMPAQ at impaq.co.za, or you can visit their website. Let's talk now very quickly. That was some housekeeping we needed to take care of there. Let's talk about roles and responsibilities now. Nadira, if I could bring you in here. I often hear from, I come from a family of teachers. I don't have kids of my own. I've got friends who've got kids. The importance of roles and responsibilities. So my mum was a teacher, and there was always the blurring of the lines between teacher mom and mom, you know, and we weren't being homeschooled. How difficult was it for you to navigate that space in this new world of homeschooling. There's the mother and father who are the disciplinarians. There's the mother and father that needs to give a bit of TLC. And a mother and father have got their own lives and their own careers and ambitions. And now we've got mother and father who are also the teachers as well. That's a big load to carry, isn't it? How do you navigate that space?
So I think, you know, children need to feel confident, you know, that the parent knows exactly what to do, even when they don't. So, you know, what they need is an environment where they can feel safe and comfortable. And yes, you know, now all of a sudden you find yourself in the having a third role to play in terms of being an educator or a mentor to your kids. And that's not always an easy thing, because you know, sometimes you don't know now when should you instill that discipline, and when should you be harsh, and when should you be then mentoring and actually allowing them to grow you know, into their own space and all of things. But you know, slowly as you get used to it, as you get used to the idea of homeschooling, it becomes much more easy. You don't even need to think about it. It just comes naturally, you know, in terms of everybody understands this. It's time, when it's time to learn, and this is the time that we are now learning, and this is the role, and they respect you for it. So I think that family values is quite important to instill in the kids, and also because, you know, most of my daughter's homeschooling time, you know, I was at work and she was at home. So she was at home alone, and when we used to come back from work, then we check on her and check and assist, which always, you know, she found a bit challenging, because she would probably have a question and she would struggle with some subject, and she then had to wait for us to come in the evening and help her with that. But you know, I can understand that, you know, the roles are easy to define when you are at home, or when the child is at home and you are at work. But now, you know, since I transitioned into a full-time entrepreneur or a homeschooling mom, you can see that it is quite challenging to actually distinguish that role between the parent and the child. But ultimately, they know, you know, they would know, depending on how you grow them up, what the family values are, and you know, the home situation and environment. They know that we're now at school and we need to, you know, finish up certain curriculum, certain work, certain lessons, and then when we're done there, then it's time for family. So got that balance sorted out now.
Louise, very interesting to hear that lived experience from Nadira and her family in taking this decision. This must be something that you get lots of questions and queries about at Impaq, because the other thing to consider is that not all parents feel equipped or educated enough to be able to take on this role. I mean, Nadira comes from an HR background, but the reality in South Africa is that we've got parents who perhaps don't even have a matric, but they want the best for their children, and they want to perhaps take the decision on homeschooling, and they might feel inadequate about taking this big responsibility on. How do you navigate this when you're faced with parents who want to know if they're good enough to be able to do this?
So I think, Marshall, there's a wonderful homeschooling community out there in South Africa, and Nadira referred to it earlier when she was talking about her experience in making decisions around being very structured to deschooling for a while and then taking the challenge on again. There's a massive support network. I know that our parents have their own WhatsApp groups where they help and support each other as well, that we're not even involved in. And then we also try and support from our side. So we have an academics team that's available that supports our parents and helps them if they have any questions. And then we also have a network of 1,400 teachers across the country who are there to help and support and assist parents. You can imagine. And you said not having a matric. I think most parents can't remember how to do grade 12 maths anymore. So it's very tricky to try and be your child's maths tutor in grade 12. So therefore, there's a very important role that these tutors around the country play in helping to support parents. But I just want to reiterate, parents are not alone in this. There are a community of homeschoolers. It's a tight-knit community who help and support each other. And then there are tutors out there as well.
Nadia, if I can bring you in here, I mean, you spoke about your own personal experience and this wide new world that you navigated over the last few years, but you haven't left it there, because now you and your older sister Yasmin have opened a tutor center to help create this and use your experiences in creating this environment to help other kids and other families who are approaching the self-study world. Tell us more about that.
Okay, so yes, I think for most homeschooling parents, there comes a time where you also feel like maybe after 6 months or a year that you're not good enough, that you're not giving the child that the best that they could get at school, and you start thinking, should I send them back to school? What I want to say is keep persevering. Don't give up, don't panic when you hit that roadblock. Because there is a support. There is a lot of support, like Louise has said, and you just need to then breathe or then take some time out and make it work. It will work. And what we found with our passion, when we started the homeschool, we thought, there's a lot of need in our community for where, like you're saying, most parents they haven't been to school. They've, and their kids are now in the primary school, and we started off, mentoring kids who are in a public school, but we started off last year doing their homework. That's how we started. So we helped the parents with their child's homework. And as we moved along, people got to hear about us, and then to hear that we also offered tutoring through Impaq, through the homeschooling. And that's where, we started helping, certain parents said, my child is ADHD and he's struggling at the school. And parents now, move their children out of school for various different reasons, and that was more, the health reason. And the child was being ostracized at school and victimized. And the child is actually learning very well with us, because you give them that individual attention. You're interested in their learning and growth, and it's not to say that as teachers at school they're not interested in the kids. It's just that they have a lot of children at one time, and they cannot. It's almost impossible to give their attention 100% to each child when there's 20, 30, 40 children in the classroom. And that's what we offer, because we're coming from an HR training development background. For me, it's about people development. And if we start, we want to start, developing kids already from now on, so that we can grow them and groom them for the future. And that's basically, why we started this journey.
Louise, another option there. It doesn't always just have to fall on the parents to take on this responsibility. We've also got independent tutors who are getting involved in homeschooling, whether person to person, but of course in the coronavirus world that we live in, online as well. How has that helped in the putting together these different models of homeschooling?
So I think, Michelle, that's definitely tutor support. That's your engagement element. So you can give people your online lessons and you can give them material, but sometimes you need that tutor support to bring something to life. And we've seen our tutors have really stepped up to the challenge. A lot of them started doing Zoom sessions during the lockdown period, where they still help learners achieve their goals online. So we've really seen, I think that's something positive about lockdown. It's really forced education to think about the future and think differently about how it's being offered. And we've really seen people step up to the challenge and try different things, use Google Classroom, using Zoom, and still carrying on with supporting learners out there.
We are at the moment getting quite a few questions on our chat room. A lot of them are to do with registration, which is what you touched on earlier. And I probably did answer some of those questions. And of course, quite a few saying that they registered, they're trying to get through to the education department, and they're not hearing back. Obviously, we understand the education department has a lot on their plate right now. There are even questions now being asked on whether they are going to make a decision to close schools for another couple of months, or what are they going to do next. I've got a question here asking, about what kind of impact, pardon the pun.
That's how we chose the name.
Well, it keeps happening. What kind of impact would that have on their curriculum and teaching in conjunction with Impaq? And I suppose just in general.
So when the schools close, it has no impact on Impaq, except for we couldn't conduct our June grade 10 to 12 exams because grade 10 to 12 exams have to be conducted in an invigilated environment. That's an Umalusi rule, it's not an Impaq rule. So any grade 10 to 12 student in the country, you can't just sit at home and write your exam by yourself. It has to be done with a registered in a controlled environment because those marks count towards your year mark and that's all part of your NSC journey. So that's the only thing we couldn't conduct as we would normally do it this year, but that was a decision by the department was to scrap the exam. So it's not counting towards anything this year. So we're running a virtual revision series where we're doing online debrief sessions on these exams. But for the rest of it, it doesn't have an effect on our learners because they can carry on. Our Sakai, our exam body, actually said they're not changing anything around the final exams because they don't need to, because learners have all the material, they can still carry on. Our online support is there. And I think that's basically one of the biggest benefits at the moment is that we offer uninterrupted education. By homeschooling, you are not bound to a school calendar and you're not bound to schools closing at the moment. You can carry on with your schooling.
I've got a question here about, it just disappeared for a second, but it's a question from Pumalela, and it was a question around age. From what I can deduce from the question is that the child is 7 years old, but because they've been using Impaq, this child is already at grade 2 level of learning. So I suppose the question there is, how much does age impact on what curriculum the child can access?
So it's irrelevant actually in this case, because every learner, we have learners who take a bit longer to reach their final destination or goal, and we have learners who get there a bit faster. So that's also the beauty of homeschooling, is you can go in accordance with your child's pace. So it's not a problem if you're a year older or a year younger, as long as it's individualized and you are not pushing. I think what a lot of parents do, they want to do 2 grades in 1 year to get their child to matric sooner, which is fine, as long as you just keep in mind that there's cognitive development that also happens along the way, and emotional and mental development. So your child might be at a grade 8 maths level when they are actually 8 years old, but they might not be socially and mentally ready for the stress of a maths exam in grade 8. But it's absolutely no problem if you are 7 years old and you are in grade 2.
I want to talk, let's shift our focus to the impact on kids. Nadia, if I could bring you in there. We're talking about exams there that Louise has just brought in. What has been your experience in approaching exams and tests as part of homeschooling? Did you find that your kids experienced less stress and anxiety facing tests and exams now that they were homeschooling as opposed to doing it at a traditional school environment?
Yeah, most definitely. I think in terms of the preparation, for the exams, there's always that bit of nerves there. But in terms of the pressure, there is a bit of pressure, but not as much as, in a school, being in a school environment. And also because there's no competition now. They don't need to compete with the other students, and there's no competition. So they're actually doing it to the best of their abilities. So they prepare the tests. There's not much of pressure in doing that. Of course, what I see now with my daughter being in matric, there's a lot of pressure in matric. So what I can say to you is if you have a learner or a child that's in your grade 11 or 12 or 10, 11 or 12, it is advisable to approach a tutor or some other or support from Impaq, because there's a lot of work and that is pressurizing, because you got to cramp everything in that 2 terms, and that's where we're feeling the pressure now. Previously, when she was still in grade 9 and that, no, it wasn't that much of pressure in the the smaller grades. But as you reach and you start moving on into the bigger grades, that's where the difficulty comes in.
I've got a question here from Vicky Lee, who's one of our participants, and she asks, when it comes up, please, how much time should we be spending per day on work? How many minutes per subject and that kind of thing? Nadira, what's been your experience about time management?
Yeah. So I was also in that trap where I was, they had to spend that 8 hours a day and have the school life at home, and that didn't work for me. So with them, you go at their pace. So 3 to 4 hours is enough. I think for younger kids, even 2 hours, because there are more playtime, more reading time, more activities around the household, get them involved with the chores and things like that. But I think 2 to 3 hours is really sufficient. And you don't need to do it Monday to Friday, So if you want to do on only school on Monday to Thursdays and Fridays, you have or you want the families want to take a long weekends or whatever the case is, you're flexible. Or you want to do evening classes, you can do that. Or you want to do weekend classes. It's really up to you. But there's a lot of flexibility. But in my view and in my experience, even the elder kids, after 3 hours they don't want to concentrate.
Louise, what is the advice from Impaq in terms of time management?
It's the same. I think, again, every family and child is unique, but the big advantage is what we're seeing, because it's individualized when you're homeschooling. Children can spend more time on the things they struggle with, and they can go over things that they are proficient in a lot quicker. So in the younger grades, we definitely see most of our clients are fine with 2 to 3 hours a day. And then sometimes towards matric, it starts increasing. But that sounds about right. That is what we're hearing from all our clients. That's the average that they say that they're getting away with. And then later on, they might start spending a bit more time. But Michelle, the wonder of homeschooling is also that if you have an extracurricular activity that you're really, really good at and you enjoy doing, like dancing or gymnastics or fencing, or you have more time to do that. So we have a lot of clients as well who excels at these activities. Now, instead of only having between 2 in the afternoon and 6 o'clock in the evening to practice, they can actually do it in the morning if they wanted to and do their schoolwork a bit later or flex it around that. So it's really flexible, as Nadira said.
Nadira, a good question is often, my question might actually allow you to give us what you're about to say. There's always the question when I've heard people speak about homeschooling, yes, but what about the social development of the child? The child needs to be around other children. What has been your experience in that? I mean, you your husband grew up in Pretoria, you grew up in Johannesburg, you live in East Rand, your kids are 17, you've got a daughter who's 17, and we know at that age, social life is very important. And then you've got a son who's 15 years old. How important, or how did you go about navigating the importance of social development for your children? Do you come from a close community where they can have friends who live nearby? Do they take part in sports at local sports clubs? How did you navigate that?
Yeah, I think you're right. There was a lot of myths around about homeschooling, and that the child is not getting a real education, and some of these assumptions can really be frustrating for a homeschooling parent. They are not sure of any social activity. In fact, they're more on the social media than we are. They got more socialized than we do. And they actually, what happened is they were more free to do art classes, and at the time when it was not so peak during the day. My son is involved with in the community sports. So and also on Impaq, there's other homeschooling kids that we get together as well. And do activities together. So there's a lot. They don't fall short of any social interaction at all. The nice part is that, is that also if they wanted to spend time with at their friends over the weekends and up until Monday and so they could do that. And that's the beauty of the homeschooling.
Louise, I know Impaq obviously focuses on the curriculum and the exams and the paperwork and that kind of thing, but do you also give people advice on the importance of that social development in a child's education?
So, Michelle, we give advice on anything that's that's close to heart. We actually have a lot of information webinars that we host with our parents, and we do touch on topics like this. And then, as I say, they can always contact us. So we get a lot of calls a day, and we do advise and support our parents in that way. And then we do things to help as well. We host a matric farewell every year, and it's always interesting for me to see how all the matrics actually, how they know each other. You would expect them to come there, and I think the perception of the market out there would be that matrics would rock up on their own, they won't have dates, and they won't know anyone. But this is the complete opposite. They all bring dates, they all look beautiful, and they all have a big circle of friends there. So it's as Nadira says, they meet each other throughout this journey, and then they do have these circle of friends. So that's a massive misconception. I also want to mention, homeschooling isn't lockdown schooling. So what we're doing at the moment, what every single household had to do up until June, was to school at home, and there was no interaction with anyone else. That's not how homeschooling works. Homeschooling families get together, they go on outings. You're also not stuck at home the whole day schooling. You can go venture out and go and do interesting stuff to add on to the learning. So people must also just realize it's not as restrictive as what you've been experiencing at the moment.
Well, speaking of which, we've got a comment here from Mary. She says, my kids feel alone. How can they get a hold of people in their community that's also with Impaq so that they can go on Zoom or something like that? There was also somebody saying that they are looking to be part of a homeschooling WhatsApp group in Pretoria East. So a few similar questions of people just wanting to know, how do they find these like-minded families who are navigating this new world?
So, Michelle, we have Facebook groups. So I think the first point would be we have a few Facebook groups per phase. There people often meet other families. And then often out of those groups, WhatsApp groups stem. So I know in some of the foundation phase grades, I know there's moms who have a parents Facebook group, and there's an FET group as well. We're not even involved in that. And then we are busy currently developing a community platform that will form part of our bigger guided learning platform in future, where people could connect as well. And then I often see people will ask on Facebook groups, I live in the East Rand, is there any Impaq families close by? And that's how they meet each other.
We are fast running out of time. Can you believe it? It does fly when you're having fun or talking about very interesting, impactful things. Let's just quickly update you on our poll that might close any second now. The question we asked earlier was, what is your current sentiment amid the pandemic? Brick and mortar school is still my preference. At the moment, 3% have said that brick and mortar schools are still your preference. At the moment, 16% says schools should conduct both face-to-face and online schooling. 24% say, I am considering taking my children out to school and homeschool will be the option. And 56% say my children are already homeschooling. So those are very interesting takeaways there on the poll, which will be closing very soon. We'll give you the final results before we wrap up here. Nadira, if I could bring you in here. I often hear have conversations with friends who have, and this is all anecdotal, it's not based on any survey or anything like that, who talk about how those circles of mommies and daddies at schools can be quite judgmental at times about various things. And you've got these new things with WhatsApp groups and all kinds of things get discussed on there. I would think when it comes to homeschooling, there are a lot of people out there who have their own very personal and are very steadfast in their opinions on whether or not that is the best thing to do for your children. But like we said at the beginning, it's a very, very personal decision, isn't it? Did you get some pushback from people saying, why are you doing this? Your kids aren't going to get the full education that they need. Are you being snobbish? And, what were some of the comments or feedback or engagement that you got when you and your husband made this decision a few years ago?
I think yes, people, especially my mom, she's very old schooled. So for her, she felt that no, the child was not going to learn properly. Why do you want to do this? So she didn't understand. No, she must just continue, you know. So I think it was more about a society. You know, the society brands you like this, or the society, you have to conform to the norms of the society. And we just felt that no, we're going to break away from this. You know, whether they liked it or not. And, you know, so there was that stigma, you know, at the time that, oh, no, you know, you are isolating your child. And this is not the best decision. And how is she going to fare in the matric? Is she going to get a matric, you know? So there were concerns around that. But we chose not to listen to that. We made a decision as a family, and we said we're going to stick by that. And we're going to support the child throughout the journey. And we did a lot of research, and Impaq was been there for years, and you know, so they were very supportive in our journey. And as we started off, they made us feel very comfortable. The curriculum, like I say, was very, very easy to understand. The exams, the tests, it's also, you know, where the child can understand and the child can make it through and pass. So we ignored that. And funny to see now that we have the tutor center, and when parents are coming, they actually don't want to send their child to school. It's almost the other way, the opposite. And I'm like, sure, a few years ago, not so long ago, everybody was just, you know, against this the idea of homeschooling. And now, you know, parents are very concerned, and it's not, you know, it comes before the COVID time also, where there's a lot of bullying and peer pressure, and, you know, where you find that, you know, stories with young kids that they're committing suicide and all sorts of things. And parents were concerned about that. And that's when, you know, when they come to see the center, they are very nervous. They're very, very nervous to make the transition. Firstly, they're also concerned about the social interaction with their child, especially if the child is in grade R or grade 1, and they you know, made the decision that they want to homeschool the child. They are very concerned about that. And that's where we say, you know, then in that situation, put your child in a tutor center where they are limited, you know, grade R children, maybe there's 2 or 3 of them, and they can work together nicely. You know, then don't keep them at home, maybe get a tutor to help them. And then there's still that interaction. And as the kids grow older, because we've got some kids, you know, from grade R up until matric, and they're very few, you know, so there's just maybe 2 in a grade and things like that, and a few grades, but we see that they do need some sort of face-to-face interaction as well. So if you're not able to send them to a tutor center, then maybe allow them some time to spend with their friends, with the circle of friends, you know, give them that time out as well. It's very important, I think, as for the teenagers to also be away from the parent, and also the parent to be a little bit time off from the kids as well.
There's quite a bit of participation and chat happening on our chat group. Just to let you all know that if there are family members that you think that they need to watch this webinar, and some of the questions perhaps you've all been debating on your family WhatsApp groups, the recording of this webinar will be sent to all of the attendees that have registered for this webinar, so then you can distribute that amongst your families and friends who you think will find this helpful. And obviously we won't have time to answer all the questions. We've had people from the Mail and Guardian and from Impaq answering some of the questions live as we've gone along. But if you do have any further questions, you can also email info@Impaq. That's I-M for mother, PAQ .co.za if you have any further questions, or go to the Impaq website. Lots of questions coming through about how to get the right information from the education department, waiting for registrations to be registered and that kind of thing. And hopefully people at Impaq will be able to help you with that. Louise, as we start coming to the end of this, we need to speak rands and cents, because we don't live in La La Land where Impaq is doing all these wonderful things for free. And schooling, good schooling in South Africa is indeed expensive. What kind of costs are we looking at here? Normally you have school fees, you've got administrative costs, you know, for different resources, for textbooks, art supplies, science kits, you know, all of those kinds of things. And even just teaching supplies, pens, papers, books, you know, those kinds of things. What advice do you normally give people when they ask you about this very important question?
So, Michelle, we have a range of packages that parents can choose. Our most affordable packages only includes assessment. So that means a parent might have secondhand books that they got from a friend that they could use, but that's our most basic package. There it starts off, if you're in grade O, it's only 600 Rand, but if you're in grade One, it will be something like 2,500 Rand for the year, for example. If you include all your hard copy books in grade 1, you're looking at about 5,000 Rand for the year. Then it goes up, and in matric, it's about 16,000 Rand if it's all of your books included and your assessments, and we mark everything for you, etc., etc. But then there's the exam board fee to physically write your exam is over 8,000 Rand. So that's added on top of that. So your most expensive package in matric would be around 23,000 Rand. Where that goes down in grade 11, your most expensive package would be 16,000 Rand for the year. So it all depends on what you're currently paying. For some people, that would sound very, very affordable. And for other people, it would sound like it's much more than what they are paying already. But it's a sliding scale, and you're welcome. On our website, our prices are published. There's actually a COVID-19 link where there's an information page under that link. And if you look there, all our prices are set out there if you want to do a bit more research.
Okay, that's very important information. Unfortunately, we've burned through an entire hour of talking about this. And indeed, I think there's so many things we could still have spoken about, but I think we gave people a good foundation and answers to some of the more pertinent questions. But I think just in closing, if I can ask both of you, perhaps just to leave us with something. Nadira, this has been an interesting journey you've taken with your family, hasn't it? And now you are being looked to for answers from other people who now also realize they want to at least look at the option of homeschooling. If you could speak to somebody who's sitting there watching this webinar, who's still trying to make up their mind, you know that it was a very personal decision, very personal experience for your kids and for you and your husband. What is your best advice to them as they make this important decision?
Okay, so from my side, I would say, whatever the challenges are, the benefits of homeschooling outweigh the difficulties, making it a valuable experience for the whole family. So know your child, select the curriculum that your child can easily handle. Give yourself permission to make mistakes. Learning is a process, but set realistic goals. Give your love generously and your criticism sparingly, and then don't worry about how fast or how slow they learn. Set your pace, and if they're not ready, they're not ready. Don't move on. Don't move on with the subject. Wait for them until they get there. Yeah, that's it from my side, and just enjoy the experience.
Thank you so much, Louise.
I think from my side, I would say to parents, talk to a lot of people, do your research, and don't tackle this alone. So don't sit there and feel alone. There's so many people out there that can help you. So reach out for support and enjoy the journey, as Nadira said. And there's really no right or wrong here. So if you go down the path and it really, really doesn't work for your child, you can always transition back into schooling.
I think that was the other point we forgot to make earlier. This is not something that's set in stone and you've made a decision in one direction, you can't change your mind, is it?
No, absolutely not. If you use a CAPS curriculum, I think it's a bit trickier if you don't use the CAPS curriculum, because then you might have to, it will be tricky to determine where they need to slot in. But if you're using a CAPS curriculum, it's easy to transition out of school and it's easy to transition back. So, but do your research, talk to people, and really don't tackle this alone. There's a massive community out there that can support you.
We've got our final results into our poll today. What is your current sentiment amid the pandemic? Most people here say my children are already homeschooling. Those are the ones who had lots of questions about assessments and tests and that kind of thing. And hopefully if they email at info@impaq.co.za, they can get specific answers, because most of those questions were quite pertinent to every situation. 23% say I'm considering taking my children out of school and homeschool will be the option. I mean, just some of the comments coming through here on that participant, Paddy, saying, brilliant webinar. I feel less anxious about next year with my son. And I think that's the sentiment that lots of people will be feeling, especially questions around social development of the kids. It seems like looking at the comments, that has been a big concern. What about the social development? I dare say that Nadira, from her experience, has told us that there are different options. There's a community of homeschoolers out there, and you are still part of your own community of where you live. There are clubs and organizations that children can be a part of where they can get that very important social development as well. I think that's where we're going to leave it. Otherwise, we could keep talking for hours. This has been another special webinar brought to you by the Mail and Guardian, sponsored by Impaq. The question today was COVID-19, to homeschool or not to homeschool. And I dare say, after all of the information we were able to bring you today, we can only wish you all the best with making this very important decision. Do take care and keep an eye on the Mail and Guardian webinar series website to find out what the next very interesting discussion will be about. Stay safe, wear your mask, social distance, and make sure you sanitize your hands as many times as possible. Take care, everybody. Thank you, Louise. Thank you to Nadira. All
Thank
the
you,
best.
Michelle.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.